Hi, friends. I'm Nathaniel Chalkin. I'm the founder of Awakening Leadership. And I want to invite you to a dialogue this Friday at 9:30 Pacific time. The dialogue is titled Coaching Alchemy. And I want to speak a little bit about what the psychedelic renaissance has to do with catalyzing the next stage of development, the stage of development beyond adulthood, and what the role of you as coaches has to do with helping facilitate this shift. I also want to share what alchemy really is, the essence of alchemy, and what are some simple, very simple principles and practices that you can take away immediately and start applying with the individuals and teams that you work with every day. The first thing about alchemy to understand is that the metaphor comes from, of course, the notion of the philosopher's stone, that there was a way to turn lead into gold. And we're familiar with this motif both in the East and in the West. One example in the East would be Tonglen meditation. And the bodhisattva could be said, him or herself, to be the one that breathes in the black smoke, the suffering of the world, and transmutes it, exhales love and light. This is the same notion as the Christ motif in the West, one who takes on the suffering and sins of the world as if they were his or her own, and again transmutes that, dies and is reborn as the light of the world. So my sense is that with these medicines, we as coaches, as we turn towards those we serve, we think we're there to fix or consult to or enlighten them. Well, turns out they may be there to heal us, to awaken us, to help us fix ourselves. An alchemist is a wounded healer. One of Jung's closest students said that the archetype of the wounded healer is the archetype of the self. Because when you finally admit to yourself that you're not just a healer fixing all those wounded people out there, that simultaneously there's something wounded in here that needs healing, which is actually what allows me to alchemize my capacity to genuinely heal others. And also that each individual has a healer within them. What a democratizing thing to realize that my job, if I am a healer at all, is to hold the space inside of which someone else, as a client, gets in touch with their own capacity to heal themselves, to hold their own tension, to turn towards and enter into their own darkness, and then to find their own light. So I hope you'll join me on Friday. We use these tools and they have a disproportionately disruptive impact. If there's an ROI or an upside that you're looking for, how do I get to the next level as a coach? Think about what is the impact that you make within a given time period. Everything that we do is based on the dojo metaphor. And if you come to get on the mat with us at Integral Martial Arts, what I would say is that everything that we do has to do with the notion of aliveness. Life is disrupting us. When a muscle tears in the gym, it grows stronger. But if it tears too much, it gets injured. If it doesn't tear enough, it atrophies. So there is a sweet spot in the middle of productive distress. Bruce Lee is said to have said that 6 months of boxing and wrestling was worth 20 years of traditional martial arts training. Why? That's the principle of aliveness. That as soon as you start sparring and evolving, working with the live tension, the real complaints, what people are really thinking and feeling but not saying, your capacity to do that is your capacity for authenticity, and it's your capacity for creative disruption. First and foremost, if you're willing to allow yourself to be creatively disrupted. This is the shift from the self-authoring achiever adult mind to the self-transforming mind. The shift from the problems we solve, boy consultants, we love to solve, to the problems that solve us. So consider this for a moment. In your client relationships, what problem are you trying to solve? As opposed to what problem is trying to solve you in that dynamic. If you can turn within and enter your own cave and face your own dragon, then you get to earn the gold that comes from having done the inner work, which of course requires a completely different kind of strength than the conquering outward strength. It requires a vulnerable strength. It requires your own capacity to find the enemy within and make peace with it, make friends with it. So the disproportionate impact, again, back to Bruce Lee, 6 months is worth 20 years. Do you have the capacity to do that kind of coaching with your clients, such that when they sit with you, it has a psychoactive impact, where they say things like, an hour sitting with my coach was worth a year of talk therapy. Or they say, in 20 years, we as a forum or as an executive team never had the type of breakthrough as we had when we just went through that simple process. It has everything to do with aliveness, your capacity to work with tension, your own tension as a way of breaking through and shining the light into the darkness of others. The capacity for you to speak the truth to yourself as a way of turning towards the tension that arises with others and speaking the kind of truth that heals, being the kind of truth force that calls chaos into order, like a superfluid particle. Anything that touches it that's chaotic gets called into coherence. The second thing Bruce Lee's quote meant to me, boxing and wrestling. 6 months of boxing and wrestling is worth 20 years of traditional martial arts. Of course, we're bringing implicitly an integral perspective to all of our work, both and boxing and wrestling, which means the quickest way for you to find your next level as a coach. And I do believe that this is a very simple way to create some of the most effective coaches and leaders on the planet, is to start to cross-train, to cross the aisle, to go to your backhand, go to the weak side, go to the thing that you cannot do well or at all. That is a metaphor for deliberate practice. And in the martial arts world, of course, that's what makes you a more integrated, well-rounded martial artist, is the metaphor of mixed martial arts. You're just more effective as a coach when you also know how to deal with conflict. Imagine being a coach in a one-on-one environment, and we call that the bowling analogy, thanks to my friend Thea for that, and Lee. How much impact can you have on an individual if you're bowling? You're coaching people in a vacuum one-on-one. It can help, and we hope that they show up differently themselves in their team dynamic. That's just the point, isn't it? The intervener, if you can intervene with the executive team dynamic, then that's the best possible way to help each individual evolve to the next level. And of course, that's a basketball analogy versus bowling. So in other words, if people ask me, are you an executive coach? I would say, well, not exactly. It's not what I prefer. I prefer to be an executive team coach, because again, the best way to up-level any individual is to up-level the whole team dynamic. How does that occur? It is specifically in the leader's willingness to pick up the mirror and look in it. Again, that self-transforming mindset where, who hired all these idiots? You can't say that as a leader, because it all is a reflection of you. People aren't off, you're off. So get right with yourself, live your own core values, then maybe we'll follow you. And very simply, the most disruptive thing that you can do for a team dynamic to democratize it and move into that Zen basketball, team flow dynamic is to empower freedom of speech. Allow the aliveness in, allow the feedback to flow up. The word tension comes from the world of self-organization, sensing and responding to tensions and holding them. It's happening for you, not to you. That whole mindset. And literally, what makes a dictatorship versus a democracy? Are you empowered to freedom of speech? That's it. That's all. So what we do in the second phase of our engagement, after the leader demonstrates the capacity to pick up the mirror and do the work, deep self-inquiry, is we put them in the dunk tank in front of their executive team, and they practice not receiving feedback. Feedback is just the noise that a mic makes. That's the old industrial paradigm. We shift from feedback to perspective, and the CEO practices perspective taking. Again, that's it. That's all. And it's so powerful. for disrupting and democratizing the dynamic on the team, which empowers a collective intelligence, as Ray Dalio says, an idea meritocracy. The best ideas win, not the biggest egos. Empowers the whole shift in The Last Dance on Netflix, which was all about the Chicago Bulls in the 90s. Think about those egos for a minute. Jordan, Pippen, Rodman, and the whole strategy of the first coach was get the ball to Jordan. Jordan won all of the accolades, the awards, everything, but the team had never won a championship. Phil Jackson came in with background in mindfulness, Zen, Lakota Sioux principles, changed the structural strategy of zone and move the ball. You cannot run the basketball. So there was a democratizing influence. Michael wasn't the only star. And then, of course, that utilized the full potential of the team. That's the 5 fingers on a hand, Zen basketball, the no-look passes, the flow, something greater flowing through us, logos. The logos flows through. The Holy Spirit possesses us. The music plays us. The dance dances us. So the very simple practice of perspective taking is one way to unlock a team's potential. So the best ideas win, not the biggest egos. And it doesn't mean there isn't a leader, but it democratizes. George Washington handed back the keys of the military to the government. Important move, as we know. And they referred to him as primus inter pares, first among equals. So that's a leadership worth aspiring to. The third step that we take inside of organizations is everyone is a coach. We use peer coaching and the notion of a coaching circle, where again, everyone is a participant, even though there are firsts among equals, people who are more experienced in certain domains. The peer coaching dynamic is how we scale the leadership development process across an organization. And I love that because that's our coaching dojo analogy. Everyone is a coach. It's hard to afford one of me for everyone or one of you for everyone. How do you scale it? Well, it's the Airbnb of talent management. Everyone is a coach. Partner up and practice. That's how it works in the dojo. And then what else? Tensions. Welcome in the tensions. The monastery is in the marketplace. Life is disrupting us. That's the place to learn and grow and bond and connect. Iron sharpens iron. That's where you want to feel like the place you work is the place you go to grow. You have your band of brothers and sisters. It's like that on the mat. There's a whole other level of trust on the other side of conflict, on the other side of vulnerability and authenticity, support and challenge. So that's the dojo feeling that we're cultivating when we're in this practice together over the long term. And from the top, as we take on Keegan's approach of the deliberately developmental organization, how do we do that with the dojo? It's from the top to the middle to the bottom. It's a disruption of leadership training in the old sense. It's not just for leaders, it's for everyone. And it's not a training. It does not start and stop. It's part of going to work. It's built in as a practice. If someone told me, oh, I did a jujitsu training, I'd say, great, good for you. And are you going to sign up? Are you going to become a member? Are you going to show up 3, 4, 5 times a week for 6 months before you earn your first stripe? So I just want to explain what the background organizational work is that we're doing, how we're getting these disruptive testimonials that say, right, one day of 5 hours was worth 20 years. And in some sense, this is the psychoactive impact, with or without medicine. So I hope that you'll join me, and also to understand that medicine itself is disruptive in this way. You hear the cliches about 5 years of therapy in 5 hours, taking the thimble to the waterfall, and to mimic Bruce Lee again, probably more than 20 years of traditional meditation wouldn't get you what one journey on a high dose of psilocybin can reveal. It is paradigm shifting. It is ontologically shocking. And it is an ego dissolution experience. It can catalyze a mystical experience. I think this is the whole other half of what I want to share with all of you. What was catalyzed in me after decades of practice, was something that is awakening. And it's awakening here and now. Medicine is just showing us how to metabolize life. And this awakening may be the gold mine under the conference table. It is this kind of awakening that we're called to. And for me, as an agnostic leaning atheist, it is only the awakening of this presence of something eternal that has given me hope that I can heal what feels broken in me after decades of meditating and inner work. You can awaken. We are the ones we've been waiting for, because it is in and through the process of alchemy, the most vulnerable places, the greatest places of tension, where we are most human. It is those raw emotions and the transmutation, the transformation process itself that awakens that raw aliveness that calls us to presence. And it is in the relational space. It is a relational alchemy that this medicine is waking up. The next Buddha will be a Sangha. And we're all Buddhas in that way. So with that hope and trust, which is really what it's all about, isn't it? Whatever word you have for the eternal principle, life, God, universe, source, it doesn't matter what the word is. They never gave it a word to begin with. In Hebrew, you don't spell out or pronounce the word of God. It's the blanket you throw over the mystery to give it a shape. Same thing in the East. The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. As soon as you name it, you make it an object, as opposed to the awareness, the presence that is aware of it, every object. So this presence that can awaken, do you trust it? In other words, do you trust in life? Do you trust the direction of the river? My ego would not and will not heal except in the absolute trust of life. And what allows the ego to finally surrender? For me, only something eternal can heal that which is bound up in time, lost, and fears its end. These are the oldest questions I've had. Hasn't this always been what it's about? Lying in bed at 8 years old, not being able to fall asleep at night. Why? Because as soon as I could think abstractly, I wondered what happened when we died. If there was a God, where I would be 1 trillion years from now, what was outside of the universe? And that the very act of falling asleep felt like dying. So I'd shake myself awake again, out of fear of that letting go. So it's time for us to begin to experience, to have the direct experience, which is what these medicines are doing. The mysteries are not a mystery. There is a great mystery, but mystes means to be initiated. Into what? Into a direct experience. You can know yourself through these medicines and find the answers to these questions yourself. So long as we understand these medicines are not just medicines, they are sacraments. They're catalyzing mystical experience. Not just a temporary spiritual experience, but catalyzing in the here and now the process of spiritual awakening. Not just a mystical experience that comes and goes, but mysticism itself, the great revelation. As it says in the Gospel of Thomas, the Gnostic Gospel, Rabbi, Rabbi, when will the kingdom come? The kingdom does not come as in it's there and then it will be here. It doesn't come by expectation, it comes by revelation. The kingdom of heaven is spread across the earth and we do not see it. It is eternally now. And to end on a humorous note, as one of my wife's friends said in response to me saying, it's all about integration. If you are not translating a temporary spiritual experience into the spiritual path itself, into the process of spiritual awakening itself, what are you doing? And she said, drugs. You're doing drugs. You're just doing drugs. And that's humorous. And there's not that there's anything wrong with that. And this is, we need to stand as guardians for this medicine of the sacrament. We need to protect the most precious secret in the universe and what that can awaken for us. So I do hope you'll join me. Many blessings. See you Friday.